Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, I first want to go through the agenda quickly. So I would like to start defining the context so that we all know what is it we are talking about here. And then I want to come to the key building block, which is building teams. And then the key about like how to support then when we are scaling up, for example, with large and global self-organizing teams. So what is changing then, and how can we actually really support the Agile architecture that still supports the business value? So that's the agenda for today's webinar. Now, for the context, first of all, the goal for this session. So I hope at the end of the session you understand that there are different options, and whatever option you are taking, there's also an impact of what you're doing. So on the one hand, what are the options and the impact of when you build an architecture that is always focusing on creating the highest business value possible, which means focusing on the customer. And then on the other side, what are the options and what is the impact of supporting an Agile, or how it's always called as well, an emergent architecture? And what this actually requires is that you need to enable conceptual integrity, and this is even needed in large-scale systems. So just a word right now on conceptual integrity. What we mean with this is that everyone follows kind of the same guiding principles, and it's not so much on how people work, but it's in this case really on what kind of technology is used and in which way it is used. So that's what we refer to when we talk about conceptual integrity. So it could mean something like how do we build the user interfaces, or how do we access the database, or what kind of patterns are we implementing? So it's really on the technical basis, and that it's really an integrity across the whole large-scale system. So that's the goal, that you understand that there are always different options, and whatever options you are choosing, it does have an impact. However, I hopefully bring to your attention what kind of option makes the most sense. My background for large-scale systems, well, we heard Wendy already talking about the books that I've wrote. Actually, it started off with the one at the lower left corner, so which was my first book, Agile Software Development in the Large, which is actually the very first book on scaling Agile, and it was published in 2004, so quite some time ago. I kind of think maybe I was too early with that, but this was the environment I was working in, and so working with like 300 people on one system just requires, now coming back to the webinar, also understanding what happens with the architecture in that case then also. Then because large, typically at least over time, was never then co-located anymore, so it was kind of a logical consequence that my next book was focusing on distributed teams, because that's whenever you go large, typically are also globally distributed. Then another thing which is more on, well, actually both technical aspect and the process aspect is the one together with Johanna Rothman, the uncovering the cost of delay. So where can you find the places in order to become more effective and efficient in what you're doing? Then again, more large scale, but now on the organizational level, that's how you can use retrospectives for organizational change. And my very recent book, and it's so recent that Wendy didn't have it even in her little introduction about what I've done, is the company-wide agility with beyond budgeting, open space, and sociocracy. So this is now really what's needed when you scale agility across the whole organization. So I'm saying that, well, on the one hand, of course, it's a great way for marketing, to be honest, but I'm really more saying it that my background for scaling up is kind of huge, and it is from really very different angles. So it's based in the technology, it's based on teams, it's on the process, and it's also on the organization. So that's my key point here. And you see a little bit how I look like, because you can see me. That was the other reason I wanted to bring that picture. Okay, so still with the context. So why are we actually talking about this? So the one thing is that Agile is really asking us to put the customer first. So always work on something that's creating the highest business value. Then with that, what we have as well is, well, that not only the customer changes his or her mind, but also just in general, market needs change, or whole markets are changing. So we have to be very flexible in keeping that highest business value in mind. That has the consequence that there's actually no time for stabilizing the architecture. So it's not like how maybe we all have learned it in university, that we have to first build a coherent, stable architecture before we focus on really business needs. These times are gone, and not only, well, because from an Agile perspective, we think it's not really a good idea to do so, but it's also, there's no time for such an approach anymore. So what comes with that as well is that, well, we need also to deliver continuously and not in like one big bang, whatever we have produced, which means, again, we keep the business value in focus. We don't have really time for building the architecture. However, the system is used, and therefore, on the one hand, well, the architecture at least has to be usable for the end user, and it should provide us, or well, maybe I say it even weaker, the architecture shouldn't hinder us in adding more business features. So these are kind of the times we're in, and that frames mainly the struggle. Now, what does Agile say to that? So we have the manifesto, and with the Agile manifesto, there are coming 12 principles, and there are some of the principles that are actually guiding us for building an architecture, well, and keeping the customer focus in mind. So looking at those two things, so the one is like the customer focus, which seems to be key in working in an Agile way. And there's this one principle that says our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. So, which is, it says highest priority. So it's always a thing that's guiding what we are doing. So it's not at all a way of thinking, well, maybe we should do something else, like stabilizing stuff or so. So it's very precise here. Then it moreover says, welcome changing requirements, even late in development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. Again, that's something which will, at least when I read it, I think, well, that can be really hard for keeping an architecture and the whole technology sane, and in a way that it still supports us and it supports the product we are building. Now, there are also a few other principles which look at it from a different angle, and they look at technical excellence. So these are the three ones that are doing just that. So on the one hand, we have the continuous attention to technical excellence, and good design enhances agility. So very clearly, although we are working always with the business value in mind, we can only do that because we pay continuously our attention to technical excellence. Because if we wouldn't, then very soon there would be no way of bringing in